All right, so today we're talking about different television production jobs, the ones specifically that aren't in film or the variations of the same title, but it's different from film to movies. Sorry, film from television. The first one is a lighting director, and there's not that much information that I found on exactly what this position does. They have similar job functions, it sounds like, to what a gaffer does in a film, but as far as I can tell, they work on shows more like reality TV, game shows, comedy specials, and things like that, and work in like theater lighting, where they're lighting like a stage pretty much, or something like that. Not as much on narrative television, or at least not from what I've found, because gaffers work in television as well, so they're usually on those productions to do that. So I think a lighting director is more of like a um, live television gaffer in a way, I guess. But I could be wrong. I'm not sure about that one. We'll get into this more later in the semester, but it's going to vary depending on whether you are doing a television show that is multi-camera setup like this, kind of like how sitcoms do it, where you have multiple cameras and they're all facing a stage or they're facing a direction and capturing multiple angles all at the same time, or a single camera setup, because you're going to need a few different crew and they're going to have different roles, some of them. On a multicam setup, it's very different from film, but on a single cam setup, it's pretty similar to the way film works. You shoot one side, you light it, you go to the other side, you light it, and you shoot it, and you do that, and you can go anywhere with the camera. But on a multicam setup, all the blocking needs to be done in advance, and everything needs to be on par because all the angles are getting shot at once to try to speed up the flow, speed up the production, and capture as much as they can as quickly as possible. So it's a little bit different. On multicam setups, they have technical producers. They ensure that the technical setup runs properly from all the cameras together so that everything's in sync and everything like that. They work alongside the director as well and physically switch between multiple camera sources. Then you have what's called a floor manager, and I think this is also not as much for the narrative projects. I think this is more for other television, like reality TV and game shows and things like that. But they manage the production floor. They usually wear like an earpiece, and communicate to personnel. Overseeing everything is where it should be, and cueing certain talent or hosts or other people to go walk out. So if you have a game show and there's a guest waiting to go talk to the host, then the floor manager would be the one to cue them and say, okay, now go. And then, cue the lights on the talk show host and cue this and cue that, because they're the ones controlling all of that and talking to the entire crew, keeping everything running smoothly. Because in those productions with multi-camera setups and live TV, the director and the producer are often in what's called the control room. So directors and producers are often in a place like this. A control room is going to show you all the different camera angles. It's going to show a bunch of different screens of different things going on for different various reasons, like if they have any visual effects, if they have any things overlaid, like news, for instance, you'll have the background showing the weather, but in all honesty, the person is just standing in front of a green screen. So in this control room, they will see the asset that is playing in the background. They'll see the person with the green screen, and then they will see when it's composited together, and they'll see it from all the different angles that they're shooting at. And then producers or directors will choose like which screens to switch to and things like that. On narrative projects, again, I'm not sure if these are used. I'm going to look more into it. Me and Priscilla are going to look more into it to see if any sitcoms and things like that use these rooms, because from what I can tell, they're more often used for, again, that live television stuff like news, sports, talk show hosts sometimes, so that they can just flip between those. They don't have to go in to edit it afterward. They kind of just grab all of their edits, especially if it's playing live. They have to do it They have to do it live. They may have a few seconds delay or a minute delay or something like that, but they still have to choose which angle they're going to show at what point. So we'll look more into that and discuss it a bit more in depth later on. But as far as I can tell with the floor manager, their job functions are very closely related to what a first assistant director would do in a film. So they're working with all the crew, they're communicating from the director or the producer to the rest of the crew so that everybody is on the same page and understanding what they need to do and what to do next. And then there may be what's called an assistant floor manager, which is basically going to be just like a second assistant director would be on a film. They're just the assistant to the floor manager. They're helping the floor manager do whatever the floor manager can't do because they have too many tasks to run at the same time. Like I said, on single cam TV shows, it's a lot more, the setup is a lot more like a film's production, but there are some differences in the job roles and responsibilities. The first one, the major one that's different, is what is called a showrunner. A showrunner are not an official credit or title given on a TV show. Like in the credits, you don't usually see a showrunner as a credit, but it's just the given name to the person that is the executive producer, the lead executive producer, the one who's running the show. So they're the showrunner. And often there'll be a lead writer on the series. They also might be the creator of the show, but they don't have to be. Someone else could create it and they could just be leading it and running the whole thing. An executive producer on film is usually someone who helps financially, but doesn't get involved creatively. They're usually the ones that go to the studios, they go to people and try to find financing and get this thing up and running so that they can start making it. Or they're the ones giving the money from them, like personally. But on a TV show, if they're the showrunner, if they're an executive producer underneath the showrunner, they are usually either fully involved or very heavily involved in the creative side of things. Showrunners have an overall creative authority. So they're the top executive producer. The showrunner has an overall creative authority and management responsibility for the entire series. They also make sure a show is getting done on time, and they make sure that scripts are finalized, budget is being followed, and they're not going over budget. They're making sure that actors stay happy as much as they can anyway. They're making sure that the writer's room is moving forward, that they're not just pausing and not figuring out what to do next. They are continuously working on either a next episode or ideas for a next season. Whatever step of the process they're in, they'll be continuously moving forward on the next thing. They also communicate and are the bridge between the studio and or the network and the crew. So they're the go-between between the studio or the network or both. When they're trying to communicate with the show's crew, they'll just communicate through the showrunner, the top executive producer. And then they'll relay all the information that everyone else needs to know. They also select and approve the department heads, like the director of photography, the production designer, the gaffer, all those different people that you'll see on a film set, on a television production set. They're the ones that are going to either select all of them because they've worked with them before, or they'll approve all of them if somebody else is trying to bring somebody, or they don't know a gaffer and somebody else has somebody that they want to work with, or they're just applying. They're the ones who are going to finalize the approval of them working on that show. They also select and approve the cast, or at least the leads and the main side characters. So they give final say to the cast. So they're kind of like, to me, they're like a director on a film. They have all the creative control, and they are running all of those things. Anything that needs to, any creative aspect or choice that needs to be made has to go up to them to get approved for final authority to be to be made in the show. If it's not approved by the showrunner, it has to go back to somebody else to fix it or change it or come up with something new to go back up to the showrunner for them to approve it so everything can move forward. And V said kind of like a line producer in a film too, maybe. In a way, yeah, I would say more like they're a combination between a film producer and a film director, because they're kind of like the top dog on the entire project, but they're kind of a combination of those two jobs. Usually on a film, you'll have a producer that is, on set, or they're just the overall overseeing everything, and the line producer will be the one on set doing the day-to-day. But they're the ones who have to approve all like the budget stuff and the scheduling stuff and all of that, while you have the director in a film making all the creative choices. And if, occasionally in a film, you'll have a producer step over the director and say, no, that's not going to be the way it is, or no, we have to cast this person to make this show sellable, or, whatever else. Sometimes there's decisions that are overruled and the producer takes control of some of the creative aspects. But for the majority of things in a film, the producer's the business side and the director is the creative side. But on a TV show, the top executive producer or the showrunner is kind of running everything. They're kind of like the top of both. They're a mixture of those two things, because they have to make sure everything's on schedule. They have to make sure everything's under budget or following the budget. And they have to approve all of these different creative decisions so that everything's remaining consistent and everything is following the vision of the showrunner, that everything's following along, and it's not like every episode's not going to be completely different from the other. They're all a similar path. The characters are the same, the story's following a progression, that kind of stuff. So they have a lot of power on a TV show, and that's why they're the ones that you'll hear about when you're hearing about this TV show has a showrunner from this other show that you liked. Well, that's good, because they're going to be the main ones that are overseeing everything and making sure the ideas are approved, and the costume and the production design and that everything's following along with what they had planned. So they're the ones that have the main input, like a director would on a film. They also run the writer's room, selecting and or approving all of the writing staff. So they turn in episodes or season outlines to the studios and networks. So once the writer's room get to a point where they have an outline for an episode, they have an idea, it needs to go up to the studios or the networks to get approved. And then, it'll go back and forth between the writers and the studios, different drafts and things like that, so that they can give notes. But the first time it goes to the studios and networks is in those outlines, and the producer, the showrunner gives it to them, and then they say whether that they can go ahead and write that out or not. And then if they get it back from the studios and the networks and they say, yeah, go ahead, that episode sounds good, they assign that episode to one of the writers. Or they may also write some or all of the episodes themselves. So depending on which showrunner is doing what, it's like directors on film. They all kind of have a different way of working and going about things. So some showrunners will try to just write all the episodes themselves, or at least the majority of the episode, and then pass it off to somebody else for the finalization. Some will hand off almost all of the episodes to other people and just write the pilot episode. Or some will write a few episodes of a season and then pass off the rest to everybody else. It just depends on that individual person's way of working, and how much control they want over the entire episode, or the writing of the entire episode anyway, besides just approving it, giving notes and things like that.
Hey, I'm sorry, I was in the bathroom. Did you answer V's question yet?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
The showrunner also ensures that the show maintains that consistent tone or voice. That way it's not veering off from episode to episode. So if a writer brings them an episode and none of the characters sound like how they did in the last 3 episode drafts, they're going to say, hey, that doesn't seem like that character. We need to kind of show that, or why is everyone acting differently? Either change the way they're acting in this episode, or we'll build to that episode. And they make those kind of decisions as well. Like I said earlier, they don't always have to be the creator of the show. And sometimes they're just brought in to help a creator execute their vision. So sometimes a creator will come up with an idea for a show, but they're too new, they're too inexperienced, or they're just not a very good showrunner from past experiences. So the network or the studio will go ahead and just assign a different showrunner to them and then the showrunner will try to execute that creator's vision as best as they can. And they'll be in close communication together to figure it out. That way, that new inexperienced creator isn't just doing it all themselves and trying to figure out how to do it on the fly. They are working with somebody who knows what they're doing and knows how to get those things done and stay on schedule and under budget, so that the studio or the network isn't losing all that money and time because someone inexperienced is mucking it all up. Other times, the showrunners are also the creators, or they have the rights to some material like the books or something like that. The Game of Thrones showrunners, I believe they had the rights to Game of Thrones for the television rights. And so the HBO had to go through them if they wanted to make Game of Thrones, because they were the ones that had access to it, because they made a deal with the writer of the books, George R.R. Martin. So that can happen sometimes where they have more leverage because they have access to something, and other times they just have an idea for something and they bring it to a network and pitch it, and the network allows them to make it. Let me go there. The other thing that a showrunner is going to do is keep everything on track with things like a show's production Bible. And that's just it's kind of like I don't know what to call it. Like, it's kind of like a mood board in a way, but it's more on the production side, where you're keeping everyone on the same page of what this production is, what the story and structure are like, who are the characters, what are their arcs, how many episodes are there, that kind of stuff. And they just make sure everybody knows what this show is doing, what it's trying, what its goals are, and who the characters are, what they are like, so that the writers are writing them all similarly and not doing what I said earlier, where they're just like completely changing the way the characters act, unless it's for a story reason. And they're just keeping everybody on track for how many episodes, how long the season's going to be, things like that. And also, they might give little briefings of like, what do we plan next? If this gets approved and we get another season, what is the main arc? What is the main story that's going to happen next? And that'll be keeping everybody on the same page and looking towards a goal and moving them all forward, so that if anyone has any questions, they can come here and try to see if they can figure out, the tone that they're going for with the show. The showrunners will also oversee the editing, and they'll approve the cuts, sound mixes, music, and any final cuts in post-production. Of course, they'll have to send it to the networks and the studios to get final approval. But they have a lot of say over like a lot of the choices and things like that. Honestly, a lot of the people were saying that the executive producer, the showrunners, actually have quite a bit of control when it comes to the TV show and the decisions that they make. It's a lot of the times, depending on the studio or the network, they kind of just leave it to the showrunner to run it. because they trust them to be capable of that. Whereas on a film, because there's so many different films and things like that, they often want to make sure that they're checking in a lot more. So that is a little bit of a difference as well. That sometimes a showrunner, especially if they're in their if it's a multi-season show and they're in their third season and the network has seen that this past 2 seasons, they've done exactly what they've asked of them. They've kept it under budget. They kept it on schedule. They've None of the stories have gone too far over what the network has suggested them not do. They haven't done any stories based on things that the network said to avoid, things like that. They might just kind of leave it up to them and then just have like a final approval when the episode's done, compared to like checking in multiple times within the process to see, are you guys writing it the right way, and is it getting created the right way? And so it really depends on, the showrunners, of course, their experience, their relationships with those networks and studios, and the studios and networks themselves, how much control they like to have. Certain studios, I'm sure, like Disney and things like that, will probably want a lot more control over what's happening in the episodes to make sure it's more family friendly, or it's not doing something they don't want, or it's include, or if obviously if it's like Marvel shows, they want to make sure that it's including things from their entire universe so that they can connect it to other shows and other projects. So there's probably a lot more control that goes up to the studio and network in those cases. But in other cases, they might just the showrunner might have more control over all of the stories and everything like that. And there might not be as much checking in and looking over their shoulder. In some cases, showrunners work with one or more people that share these responsibilities, making up either co-showrunners or what's called a producing team. So Game of Thrones, I believe they were co-showrunners, the two guys. I don't remember their names, but D&D. And so they were working together. They had mutual they had the same rights pretty much. One could approve something, the other one could approve the same thing, or they could each deny it on their own. And with those, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously it's probably dependent upon the production, the television production, what's going on in it, and if they require you to have approval from both of them, or if they require just approval from one or the other. It's probably just dependent upon the people and how the production's set up. But a producing team will just be multiple people like that, where they have those shared responsibilities. So you might have somebody that looks more over the scheduling, and that's really all they focus on. They might work on some other stuff, but their main job is just to make sure everything's on schedule and everybody's doing their part. And then you might have somebody else in that producing team that is looking more at the budget and making sure everything is following the budget or staying under budget. And if anything goes over budget anywhere, they try to find out why, and then they try to see if they can lower it, or if they can take some other part of the budget and put it towards that, so that everything is going to maintain under budget for this season at least, if nothing else. And if it goes over budget, they might be the ones that need to go to those networks and those studios and say, hey, so we're a little over budget, this is why, blah blah blah, and try to get more funding so that they can keep it going. But if it's just one person, if it's just a showrunner, then they're going to have all those main responsibilities upon themselves. They may have assistants and things like that. There might be other executive producers underneath them where they can defer some of those responsibilities, but the final say will go towards them before heading to the network and the studios. Because the other thing that a showrunner will do, like a producer in a film, is they, for the business side, they will fire and hire the crew. They have final say in the casting, and they keep things overall on schedule and under budget and all of that type of stuff. Whereas for the director side, the creative side, like I already was saying, the writing, the look of the film, all of that stuff, the shot list, that's going to be finally approved by the showrunner. And then depending on the production, heading up to the network or the studio for the final approval for them to move forward. Then there's television producers, and they do some similar functions as a showrunner and are more like a film director with more creative control. Showrunners oversee the producers, and obviously the final say goes to the showrunner, but producers will make a lot of the creative and logistic decisions before getting fully approved from the showrunners. So if you're starting from the bottom, if you're a new writer there or something, you got you've been working there a few years or something, and you finally get the chance to write up an episode yourself, it might not go, it's not going to go straight to the showrunner. It's going to go through multiple people before it gets there. So one person's going to have to like it, then the next and the next, before it reaches the showrunner, and then they'll like it, and then it'll be sent up to the network or the studio for final approval. In that way, also with the showrunner, they have extra help. So they have assistants, they have people underneath them that can handle the things. If you're looking at it, this is film is a business, and television production is a business. So if you're looking at it as from a company perspective, you have your showrunner, which is the manager, the general manager over the entire building, and then you have different departments with different supervisors. And underneath those supervisors, you may have a lead that gets paid hourly, who is, right above the regular hourly paid employees. And then you have the employees, and that's it. So it goes up those steps before getting straight to the general manager. It doesn't go straight to them. It goes up the ladder until it gets to them for final approval if there's any big decisions that need to be made, if it's coming from an employee. That's the same way it works with the television production. It's very hierarchical. Hierarchical? I think I said that right. Depending on the size of the production, you're going to have showrunners, which are the top executive producer. Then you might have additional executive producers underneath them. You might have co-showrunners, like I said, or a producing team, which are all going to be on par with the showrunner's responsibilities. Otherwise, they're going to be the top decision maker, and everyone else will be below them. You'll have supervising producer. You'll have regular just producer, co-producers, assistant producers, coordinating producers, line producers, and associate producers. So it's a big ladder to get up to the top. All showrunner duties will delegate and trickle down to these other producer roles and then go back to the showrunner for final approval. Additionally, some writers can often get some form of producer credit based on seniority and overall input into the show. So the writers that stay on a show for a while and have done well in the past with writing, they might start to get some producing credit if they want, where they'll have extra responsibilities. They'll have a bit more on the business side, but they'll still be a writer. It'll just be a more senior position of a writer. Does anyone have any questions about showrunners before we move on to directors for TV? All right, so for TV,
nope, I think you explained it pretty well.
Okay, cool. All right, so
it's
for
kind
TV,
of hard because different showrunners. Sorry, Annie. I was gonna say different showrunners had a different levels of responsibility from what we've looked at, from what we've seen, and holy cow, it is very much like a script supervisor. It is a lot, and
no, like I said, it's like a director. It's like if you're looking at it from a film perspective, it's like a director mixed with a producer. Because
yeah, but it's so much more because they're into every little detail too that they have to check up on. So sometimes when I was reading about it, it felt like 5 jobs in one to me.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And that's why some productions will go the route of you need to share this responsibility with someone else, or you need to share this responsibility with a team because there's just too much.
Yeah.
And then I would say that also would go into the, how does that person like to work? How much control do they like to have? If they're a control freak and they want to make sure that they keep this thing exactly the way they want it, then they're going to want less people having say. So they might want to take upon themselves all that responsibility. Again, I'm going to go back to Game of Thrones because I heard that those two were writing the episodes, and HBO was like, hey, do you need writers? Because you don't have any. And they were like, no, we'll handle it. So they tried to write all the episodes themselves. And so they wanted to take that responsibility upon themselves to write out the show. So it just depends on the showrunner and how much responsibility they want to take upon themselves, how much work they want to do, and how much they think they can handle. And then after that, if they are starting to fumble, or if they're starting to, if there's cracks that are starting to show, then the network and the studios might say, you know what, I don't care what you want, you need help. We're putting these people in place so that you have people to do these jobs because you're not handling it the way you should be. Vish said the movie producers showed it pretty good what showrunners go through. Oh, it's called Producers?
Oh, I think I heard about that. They were talking about.
Oh yeah, I think there was also some movie called, or like a documentary called Showrunners, which also explains through like what they do and how, just show you kind of behind the scenes of their job as
Yeah, I
they
was
go
gonna
through it.
say, I feel like either the movie producers or the show or movie showrunners. We saw one of the videos we saw was a panel of them talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
either that movie or that show.
All right, so for TV directors on TV are often only directing one episode a season of a season. They might not even come back ever again. They might just work one episode and be done. Or they might do a few episodes here and there, or a few in a row. Just depends on, again, it just depends on however it's set up. But they are not going to be working on all of the episodes. So this inherently makes each director have less creative control than they would have on a film, because on the film, they know the entire picture, whereas a TV show, they only know their episode or their episodes if they're working multiple. Characters and actors could already be established, so the director has less input on how different the actors can portray those characters in the episode. Something too dissimilar to what the character has already acted like throughout previous episodes may have audiences think that an action or emotion is out of character. So they also don't have as much say in making changes to the script. That on a TV show is it has to go back to the writers, and they have to approve it, the showrunner as well, because they're usually the head writer. The director can't just say, nah, let's change that line and do it like this and do this and that and do whatever they want like they can on a film. Because after a film buys the writing, the script, the screenplay, they can kind of change whatever they want if they've paid for the rights to it. And that's in the agreement that they're allowed to make changes. And so the director can make changes to a scene, they can make changes to dialogue, they can do whatever they want. But on a TV show, because it's continuous, because it has previous like established tone and character, they have to make sure that it's following along with that. And they often can't just go in and make changes to the script without getting approval. And so it's more of a process if they're trying to change what is already written. Because of that, the showrunner maintains final say and director's creative decisions over the director's creative decisions. And while a producer on a film can overrule a decision a director makes, it's not going to happen as much as it does on TV, since the director won't know the characters as well as the actors and the showrunner. Same thing with like the shot list. So they'll still work with the cinematographer on the shot list to get what kind of shots they're going to do for that episode. But if the angles and the positioning of the camera are going to be way too different from previous episodes or future episodes of that TV show, It's going to make it not feel like that show. So a director in TV normally won't have as much input in the shot choices as they would on a film either. They'll still have some input, like they're not completely no creative input, but they just have a lot less. They have a lot more boundaries and a lot more what is it called, red tape that they have to go through to get their vision approved, which is why they're not the main person on a TV show. The showrunner is, because they're overseeing the entire thing. And so it's their vision, not the director's vision in that case. On single camera productions, directors will often do most of the same functions as they would on a film, just with less creative control. So they still do the shot list with the cinematographer and something like this. They still do blocking, and they figure out how the characters are going to be moving. Oh, why isn't it opening? Oh, like this. They might make a blocking diagram like this. They might wait until they get on set, but they're still going to figure out where the characters are going to go in the scene, what they're going to be doing. On a multicam setup like sitcoms, they often have to do these diagrams and make sure that it's all known beforehand, because they're kind of going to know the set already. Sitcoms will often be in a few different sets. Like they'll have a room or a place that everybody goes to a lot within the show. Friends did it with the coffee shop and the apartment. And then How I Met Your Mother did it with the bar and their apartments. And so those sets are going to be the same. So they're going to already know the area. And so it's going to be easier to make these diagrams. So it's going to be more important too, because all those cameras are shooting at once. And they need to make sure that all the angles are picking up what they need to beforehand. And by doing that, they have to make sure that the characters are turned a certain way and they're in a certain part of the room so that the camera's picking up what they want them to. Whereas on a single camera production, it's less needed, but it's still very important to do. And usually they'll still do these diagrams just to kind of get an overall idea. Some directors, it just depends, but they might wait until they're on set to really figure it out, especially if it's an on-location TV show where they don't really know the area yet. Then they might wait until they get on set to figure it out. But it just depends on the director or the production type that the TV's doing. And then, of course, they will direct the actors. But that, again, the actors are going to know the character at that point, depending on when the director is coming on to do their episode. Especially if it's a few seasons into a show, the actor's going to know the character better than the director does. So that's the other difference. On a film, the director gets access to the characters way before the actors do. And they're going to know inside and out what their background is, who they are, and all of this. On a TV show, the actors and the writing staff or the showrunners have already worked out what these characters are, who they are, what their backgrounds might be, why they might be the way they are. And so they know their characters better than that director's going to know coming in. So they're also not going to have as much input and say into things like that. But then their other job as directors is the same as film as well, where it's leading the crews.
It also depends. It also depends if it's like early on in the show or like seasons and seasons in, because in the beginning they still are trying to figure out who the characters are, so they might have a few more discussions with the director of like, oh, what do you think of this? So maybe they might have a little more freedom and like
it really depends. I think it really depends because even if we're talking pilot episode, the showrunner is the one who either wrote it or who got rights to it. And so they're the ones who know it better than the director who's coming on later. The director will come on before production begins. They'll come on, I don't know how long it is, but they'll get the script and they'll read it and they'll figure out how they're going to do these things and talk to the production staff and the writing staff to figure out how best to execute that plan and if it works with the show. But a showrunner knows it from the beginning. They're on it from day one to get this show made. So they're still going to know it better than the director will, even if it's early episodes into a season. And the actors might, I don't know, the actors might ask the director, but I feel like they would also go toward the showrunner. Hey, does this make sense? Or the director at least would bring the actor's question to the showrunner, or have an in-depth conversation with the showrunner beforehand to figure out what the showrunner is going for so that they can execute their vision.
No, yeah, I know. I just meant that, like, if they want to try something, I feel like it's a lot easier to have that discussion in the beginning than seasons and seasons in.
Yeah.
When they're like super, super established. Because I feel like in the first season, they're a little more open to changing a few things. In my experience with a lot of shows, characters can change a lot from one season to the next.
Can you put it on and then go watch this thing somewhere else? Yeah. Sarah, come here.
I'm gonna mute you, Sarah. All right. And then they're also going to be, answering questions from the gaffer, the director of photography, production designer, and things like that about the episode. So it'll also be like that. They'll be leading the crew on that episode or their episodes that they direct. On multicam productions, they will maybe be ensuring that the production runs well, communicating with the camera operators and overseeing the floor production for the angles, ensuring everything audio and video is captured for editing. Again, I'm not sure if that's exactly like live TV or if that is narrative as well, but I do know, multicam productions just run very differently from single cam productions. And that's why I'm going to add that to the syllabus to learn more about it later on. In countries other than the United States, TV directors of multiple episodes will often have more control than they would in the US. In the US, they don't give very much control to television directors. That stays with the writing team and the showrunner. But apparently in other countries, if they've directed multiple episodes, they've gotten more of a feeling for the show and the characters and how it works. They start to get more creative control over future episodes that they direct. And then some actors of a show will often direct an episode or more because as I said, they understand those characters. They worked with them for years. They've heard from many different directors and kind of learned from them as they went. And so they'll often take an episode or two and direct it themselves because they understand how it works and how those characters should be. So if you ever look into a television show that's been on multiple years, you'll often see that at least one of the actors directed a few episodes. I think David Schwimmer and Friends directed some episodes. I can't remember the guy's name, but he plays Sean Spencer in Psych. I know he directed some episodes. And so these actors will start directing episodes later on once they get the feel for it. Some of them, of course, not all. So TV directors are just most often hired to mold a show episode to that of which was explained by the executive producer or the producer, rather than giving their own feel on the production like they would on a film. There will often be meetings between the showrunners, the producers, and other key personnel with the episode director to go over the concept of the episode, where the director can give their ideas and request any changes. So that's usually where they start asking for things and putting their input in. But it doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. It just means they're putting it out there. Here's my idea for it. Here's what I was thinking we could do. Oh, this line, can we change it? They got to do that in the pre-production phase of the television episode, not on set. And I mean, if they're on set, usually they'll have the showrunner there, or they'll have some kind of production team member there. So if a line isn't working on set, they'll often be able to go to them and say, hey, this isn't working. Can we change it and get approved or not? But during pre-production, that's really when they try to make as many changes as they are looking to make. And then they have that meeting and that discussion with the key personnel and the showrunners and producers of the show. After that meeting, the scripts are taken back to writers to either make the director's changes or not to make any changes or to make any adjustments. If they don't want to go with the director, but they do feel like it needs to be changed, then they will also do that. So they'll have that feedback, the meeting, and then it'll go back to the writers to be finalized. And then in further meetings with the director, they'll discuss how the director plans to visually capture the story and the emotion of the episode's script. Then, depending on the production, a director may be left alone to create the episode once everyone's on the same page and they agree to what the director has planned. This depends on the director, it depends on how much they trust him, and it depends on, or her, and it depends on a few other things, but how much they like their plan, things like that, or how much they know that they follow their plan. But they can be left alone after they've explained what they're going for, how they're going to do it, the shot list, and all of that. That stuff's going to be figured out in pre-production, shared with the showrunner and the production team, and they're gonna say yes or no on all these different things, and they'll hash it out and figure out exactly how to execute it. And then depending on the production, they'll either leave them alone with a little oversight, or they'll be directly over them inputting any decisions during the filming. Now, an assistant director on a television show is more of an optional thing. It's not always going to be there, especially on multicam things. That's going to be more like the floor managers, like I was talking about. Assistant producer is going to be the right hand of the producer and often the first person to be delegated a task. So even if that task is to delegate it further down to the other crew, the assistant producer will be the one to get that task. A director of photography does mostly the same functions as they would on a film, but depending on the kind of TV, there may not even be a director of photography on set. For narrative works, though, they are there like almost every time. The DP not on set is more for those live shows and the talk shows and things like that that don't need a creative input on how the images are shown as much. For the writing and approval of scripts, you have that tier of different people. So you have writing PAs, writing production assistants, and they're not actually writing. They are basically just production assistants for the writing team. They're running tasks, taking calls for the writer's room, and getting people's drinks, doing things like that, and running any tasks that they need to work efficiently. Then you have writer's assistants. They're the next step up. They're the ones are going to be taking notes during any brainstorming sessions with the writing staff. They then organize all of those ideas and concepts for the other staff to write the scripts. They may also be asked to proofread the final script pages to make sure there's no spelling errors and things like that. And they also may be requested to do any necessary research before, during, or after the writer's room tries to write out the story. So if they're trying to write out a story about a hospital and some kind of disease that one of the characters got, they may be given, research a disease that we can input here so that we can figure out what this character has and make it sort of like this and these symptoms. And then they'll go do the research and make sure that it's accurate and makes sense in the concept. Then you have what is called the staff writers. They're the basic grunt work of the writing. They are there to develop and do what's called break story. I think I actually have I actually had pictures for this, but anyway, here's the writing rooms. They can be set up in multiple different ways. everybody could be facing the same way. Everybody could be surrounded in a table, chairs with no table. This also depends on the production and how they feel like the people should interact with each other, how personable it should be, and multitude of other reasons, how much space they have in that room, and whatever else. There's multiple reasons to have different setups, different layouts for a production room or a writer room. I mean, that's like brainstorming and then putting them all the ideas up and figuring out how to order them in what category. And this could be something like breaking story. So breaking story is coming up with each individual scene for the story and arranging those scenes in the order that they'll appear in the script. So after a brainstorming session, a staff writer will take the ideas that were said in the brainstorming session, and they'll figure out, okay, I have episode 2. We talked about this. We talked about maybe this could happen. Let me think of different scenes that can play out, that can make those ideas come to life. And so it's just a little quick summary of what would happen in that scene, who would do what characters are there, that kind of stuff. As the staff writer, their work is uncredited mostly, unless they are the ones who get assigned, who become the assigned writer for that episode. They get paid weekly, and they don't get paid per script. They just get paid on a weekly basis, whatever their pay is, like you would any other job. The next step up from that is what's called story editors. Story editors are writers that have been with the show for a while or have been on other shows or worked with the same crew and showrunners and things like that in the past. And they work on a salary and get paid for individual scripts. They are the next step up from staff writers and get credited for at least a single episode each season. So no matter what, they're going to get at least one episode to write and be chosen as the assigned writer. Whereas staff writers, they might not ever get an episode assigned to them. They might just make these, they might just break story, which is just coming up with the general outline of the script. Then after the story editors, you have co-producers, and they're partially writers, but now they have also taken duties of a producer, or a delegated amount of them anyway, because they're not a producer yet. They are co-producers, so they will be passed down. They will have delegated responsibilities coming down from the producers to work with things. After co-producers, you have producers, which are the seasoned writers that accept additional responsibilities, and the staff writers are going to be the ones answering to them. So they're overseeing the staff writers if the staff writers have any questions. Some brainstorming sessions will just have the producers with the staff writers. Some of them will have even higher up. It just depends on who's available and how much they're available, depending on who's going to be in each session and things like that. But a producer will always be there to oversee the staff writers and answer any questions or make sure they're doing their jobs, that they're writing out they're breaking their story for their episode and things like that. Then you have what's called supervising producers above them. Supervising producers are overseeing the producers. Basically, they're the producer's supervisor. So supervising producer. They oversee the producers and the writer's room when the showrunner and the executive producers aren't available. They work with the writing staff directly for brainstorming, breaking story, and writing scripts. So they're the next step up above the producers, and they just make sure everybody's doing their part. Everybody is working on schedule, and when the showrunner and the executive producers aren't available, they're the next one that are going to be overseeing the entire thing. Above that, you have co-executive producers. They're going to be the second in charge of the entire show. They are the last ones that read the final scripts before it gets sent to the showrunner for final approval. And some productions, they may even be given the authority for final clearance of script drafts in place of the showrunner, especially if the showrunner is working on multiple projects at once. A majority of their duties may be delegated to a co-executive producer. So that co-executive producer might actually be the showrunner on the show. It's just the title for showrunner has been given to somebody else, but they might be working on 2, 3, 4 projects all at once. So obviously they're not going to be there at each of them the entire time, and they have to delegate all those tasks to somebody else. That would fall to the co-executive producer next. And then of course you have the showrunner at the very, very top. They have final authority on scripts and if changes are needed or not. And lastly, the WGA, or the Writers Guild of America, commissioned that a certain number of episodes each season will be written by freelance writers. So if you're a freelance writer, you actually do have the chance to write episodes of different television shows, because they have
that kind of explains those episodes that you're like, that doesn't feel like the same writing, or this feels like someone like very different in tone, because I always wondered about that. If
it could be, yeah, it could be those filler episodes and things like that. But if you are a freelance writer, you do have the chance to write for a TV show, which is interesting. So the writer's room clearly has a huge impact on the overall creative aspect of the show. In film, like I said, the writers might not even be contacted again after their script is sold. And any changes made thereafter are just decided without input from the writer. There can be involvement from the writer in film, but that depends on the production and how involved the writer is.
So they might just like your idea or your concept and buy the script from you for that, and then just change the script to match the characters more, or like change details to make it more to do with the story.
Yeah. But in television, the writers are the main ones to go to, the main ones that are going to make these changes and keep the show consistent. And they're much more involved. Vish said Game of Thrones last episode, perhaps a freelance writer. I don't think so. I think that was them. I'm not sure though, maybe. I think that was the two, because they weren't working on.
I was gonna say, because they
weren't working from
talking
any
about,
material anymore, so they just had to come up with the ideas their own. That's the other thing. If you are working from material, you're going to be having to do research into that. So if you had that necessary research thing, the writer's assistants, that could also be, hey, read the book and make sure that this thing makes sense and that it follows the lore.
Plus, even if it is, a freelance writer, at the end of the day, they do have the liberty to change it, to edit it, to once they purchase it from you. So, like, they could have still changed it and made it better. Normally, they buy from freelance writers when they find the concept interesting, or the storyline interesting, or like a certain back and forth interesting between two characters.
The other thing, I'm not sure on this, but the other thing I think freelance writers get usually won't be pivotal moments in the season, like the first episode. If there's going to be a middle break, they're not going to have that last one before the break. They're not going to have the final episode of the season usually, because those are so important to keep people invested and to get another season, that usually I believe they give freelance writers more of like those middle episodes, or somewhere in between. But I don't know, maybe they do. It just depends on how good of a script you wrote and where it falls in line with their season.
I feel definitely not the first episode, because that's
not the first episode. The pilot, well, maybe the first episode of a season, but the pilot episode is generally going to be written by the showrunner or an executive producer, because they're.
And I feel like the last episode they wouldn't have a freelancer unless it was something like very special, very important. Like they were like, oh, let's see if people have good concepts for like a nice little idea to add to the last episode or something. I don't think that they would base their entire last episode on I would hope not.
Yeah, I don't think they would do a
Yeah.
series finale on any show,
Yeah.
giving it up to a freelance. But it is cool to know that you can write.
Not that some people can't come up with better ideas. I just feel like if it's your show, your project, I'd like to think that you'd be able to write a good finale, or, you know, not rely on other people, on fans or other writers to do it.
It is cool to know that like the writers that aren't involved in the show do get a chance to write
Yeah, that is
for
pretty
these
awesome.
other shows and things like that. Because I was always hearing like articles talking about writing for TV, and in the back of my head before I knew this stuff, I thought, yeah, right. Why would they ever pick your episode? You know, they already have a writing staff. But now I know that the reason why those articles are there is because it actually does happen. It's required to happen based on the Writers Guild of America. And you might have to be part of the WGA though to get that incentive, but I'm not sure. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to add on any television jobs that are different or completely not in film? All right. So moving on from that, we're going to talk about art directors and what they do. This comes from masterclass.com. So on a smaller production, the art director and the production designer are often going to be the same person. You're usually not going to have two people because it's just going to cost more. But on larger sets, the art director is going to be the production designer's second in command. So they'll be the ones right underneath the production designer, helping them achieve their goals. They design sets, oversee artists and construction workers, and help determine the overall look of the film with the production designer. In pre-production, the art director acts as the liaison between the production designer and the construction crew. When principal photography starts, they often will be coming to set to report to the production designer how the look is coming along and how the set is being built for, you know, future episodes, if it's a TV show, or for the next week or month or whatever of filming for a film, because they're constantly working on the next set. If they're building a lot of sets or they're making a lot of locations and they're building sets on those locations, they're not all built at once. And so there'll be a process where the production designer's on set working with the director and overseeing everything that's being filmed, while the art director is working with the construction crew on the next set for the next day or the next week. And then they'll be reporting that to the production designer. So they'll supervise things like an art director will also supervise the creation of concept art. So things like this, where you're seeing which one, you know, making sure that the concept artists are on time and that they're coming up with enough ideas so that when they display it to the director and the production designer, that they're going to have a multitude of ideas so they don't have to start all the way over from the beginning and take up more time. So they make sure that they're working. They'll also oversee any like pre-visualization. So that's just like a very small, crappy graphic that is showing what's going to happen in the actual scene. Sometimes it's a little more fancy like this one, but other times it can just look like a really cheaply rendered animation that doesn't even have the characters move their arms. Just depends on how in-depth that pre-visualization is being made. He'll also oversee what's called the maquette, which is just like a model. It's like a statue basically of a design. So it's more of a 3D look at whatever element of the production it is. It could be a prop, it could be a creature, it could be some kind of CGI element or monster or whatever else. Sometimes they'll make these little statues to kind of show what it's going to look like, and they'll be overseeing that. And then they'll also be overseeing any models that are created or miniatures that are created for the production, or just to show what that location is going to look like, or what the set is going to look like once it's built, and that kind of thing. Depending on the production, the art director may also be the one to take any design sketches, like the production designer or a sketch artist might be the ones that are making these design sketches and showing like, this is what this is going to look like. These are my ideas for it. And the art director will be taking that and creating more of a technical drawing out of it to get them ready for being made. So like technical drawing, I don't have one of a product, but I have one of like a room. Could be something like this, where you're talking about the set or the location or a little building, and you're showing all the dimensions of it. You're showing how wide it is, how big it is, how tall it is, what it looks like from the top, what it looks like from the sides, what it looks like on the bottom, and what kind of materials you need to make it. Same thing right here. You can see that it's like just a little bit of just kind of showing like in what way it's facing and all these other little technical things that I'm not really too savvy on, but it's showing how tall these things are going to be in comparison to other things, and basically just a more clear vision of how to get that thing made. Whereas if it came from the production designer or a concept artist, you're not going to have any details about how tall it is or how wide it is or how much space it's going to take up. It's just going to be the look of it. You're not going to have any of these words and any of these dimensions on it. It's just going to be like, this is sort of what I want it to look like. Art director will take that and make it more technical so that it can actually be executed and created to some standard. Also, during a production, the art director is going to be managing a detailed budget for the materials and labor to create the sets and other art elements. So they're going to be helping the production designer in that case. And they may be given certain responsibilities. Different productions will have different responsibilities for the art director, depending on the production designer and what they need help with. They will give them certain tasks to oversee, certain departments maybe, to make sure that they are staying in schedule and on budget. And then they will have the art director report that information back to the production designer so that the production designer can keep track of the overall budget and schedule of the entire art department. Whereas the art director is just going to have, they're going to be doing the kind of the same thing, but to a lesser extent. They're going to be more focused and more honed in on things. They're almost always going to be over sets. If any sets are needing to be built, the art director is going to be the one overseeing all of that, making sure it's all getting done in time and that it's not costing too much. And if it is, they're going to be the first ones to go to the production designer and start talking to them about, hey, we need more funding for the sets, or this is taking longer than expected. We weren't expecting this thing to happen, or this part of the set just broke. So now we have to start over on this piece and it's going to take 2 days longer. What do we do? And they'll be the ones to really go to the production designer first and talk about that with any set construction that's being done for the project. They'll also act as the coordinator between the art department and other departments like visual effects, costumes, property or props, transportation, and locations. So all those departments are, the art department needs to work with all those departments to make sure everybody's following that same look and everybody's on schedule and it's all going to be able to get done on time, and that each department kind of knows what the other department is doing so that everybody is working towards the same goal. And the art department, if anyone has a question from visual effects department about what the look of that room is going to be, the art director is going to be the one to communicate with them and go back and forth. And then if they need to, they'll bring it to the production designer, but they'll be the ones to really coordinate and communicate between all the different departments. So basically the production designer meets with the director and those come up with the plans for the production. And then the art director takes those approved plans and they execute them, making sure that it follows suit with what the production designer and the director had in mind. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about art directors? By the way, some of the videos are about art directors, even coming from art directors. They didn't really know how to explain their job. They're like,
yeah, I was gonna say that was probably the most frustrating part. We were like, oh my gosh, like they don't even know how to explain it. And from what I've like, one thing that I've learned consistently is that TV shows, it can vary. Like the responsibilities of multiple departments can vary depending on how they distribute, what kind of company they're working under, their budget. It can vary quite a bit.
yeah,
It reminds me of the indie scene a little bit like that.
Yeah, it really varies depending on, obviously the art department is going to be very different from set to set or from production to production. So it really varies on what the responsibilities are, because you might not have any set construction in the entire project, but you might still have an art director because the studio or the producers hired them. So now what is their job? What is their function? How much of the production designers functions can go to the art director, and now their job might be more communicating and things like that instead of creative art overseeing type stuff. So it just really depends on the production, but that's from what we can tell the majority of their job functions that are pretty consistent to what we went over. Okay.
But yeah,
Huh?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, but yeah, it was very interesting and very cool. It just seems like when you work on TV, you work a lot of hours, and I'm not saying that most of them aren't paid well. They are, but it does also seem like you're doing a lot and you're juggling a lot, and it seems like a big responsibility. No matter what department, it just kind of felt like that. Like it was a lot of wearing a lot of different hats because there's so many little things that you have to take care of, and it would be really hard and really expensive if they had to have one particular person delegated to every single little detail. So they try to like make the jobs work together as much as possible and complement each other as much as possible, but it definitely is a lot of work.
Yeah, TV show, the other thing about TV production that's different from film is that it's a very tight schedule. There's so much more stuff to do that everybody has a tighter schedule. They don't have as much time to edit. They don't have as much time to film. Multicam shows are expected to be done within I think they said 6 hours for a half hour or 4 hours for a half hour. And that
even
Friends
cartoons
was known for being longer because they take 6 to 8 hours to create it. But to film, to me, because I know way more about film than I do about television production, it sounded like, oh, that's not even that long. But apparently that's a really long time when you're talking about a multicam half-hour production.
Because you're also renting out the space. You're working with a studio that probably has a bunch of different lots, that probably needs the cameras, that probably needs the time. You have to schedule multiple different actors, multiple different camera crews that probably work on more than one production. And so I can imagine that, writers' rooms and stuff like that. I can imagine it's kind of like an office, and they need that space, and this person that works in this department also needs to do this thing. It's kind of how I imagined it in my head.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because I was like, TV shows, cartoons must be shorter, must be longer then because you need to draw them and all that. Nope. I'm pretty sure when we were watching the behind the scenes of South Park, they said they had 1 week to write, animate, and shoot everything. And I was like, 1 week?
Park is, look at the quality of their
No, I know, but still, like the
Yeah, South
writing's
Park is different because it's shot more like a claymation kind of thing. Like it's shot with
no,
paper.
I know that too, but the more I looked it up, it was like, oh yeah, that's not bad for animated series. Like that's pretty much the average. Most shows, both animated and not, have like a few weeks to a week to get things ready. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so quick.
It's a lot quicker of a turnaround than it is for film because it's
you can kind of see why so many crappy episodes slip through the cracks. It's like filler. Or why some things like continuity wise, sometimes, especially with sitcoms and like TV shows, get a little wonky sometimes, probably because it's hard to keep continuity with such a small window of time.
That's where the showrunner comes in and where they're supposed to be overseeing all those decisions. And that's why they if they're taking on too much of the responsibility of the rest of the crew, like the other producers and the writers, then they don't oversee as much on the other side of things where they're overseeing that everything is going according to plan, because sometimes they can get too focused on, trying to do too much, and then they end up ruining other aspects of it that they aren't having total control over.
And the next thing you know, Ross has 3 different birthdays and friends, and no one knows which one it really is.
And that would also be where they should have asked the assistant writers, hey, make sure that, check through our previous scripts and make sure that we didn't say anything about his birthday. Because that's some stuff you might give off.
Because that is like a highly debated thing. It's like, when is his birthday? Because he says one, it's in October, the other one's in September, the other one's in, like, it's just.
So I wanted to show this. This is kind of the organizational chart of television production. The executives at the top, that would be the studio or the network, the ones that are reaching out to the showrunner. Producers is all in one box, but really, as I said, you have the showrunner at the top, co-executive producers, and then supervising producers, associate producers, assistant writers, and all that. And they're the ones in the middle that are going to be connected to everything else. So, it's a very different look than the film organizational chart, which has the producer and the director at top, and they're the ones getting all the people headed to them. Whereas the producers in the middle are also the writers. And so the writers are connected to everything else. And they're the ones making all the decisions. Instead of like in film, where the writer is a separate person entirely and not really connected, or maybe connected, but not as much as on a television show. And then the director, as you can see over here, is kind of just off on his own. Like he'll be over some people, but he's not going to be a direct contact to anybody because they're going to be different people. There's going to be different directors on set. So you can't just go to the director and ask them anything because they only know their episode or their episode, multiple episodes. So that was something I forgot to show. All right, moving on from that. Well, actually, does anybody have any comments on that? Brian, did you want to say anything? I know you unmuted for a bit. Okay, so the next thing we're talking about is producer reps and sales agents. And I learned about aggregators and PMDs this week, so I'm actually going to add them into the syllabus somewhere. But I've learned a little bit about what they do, but I want to read up more on what they do. But this week we're talking mainly about sales agents and producer reps and what they are. So this comes from Film Courage. I think it's let me go to it. I think it's B in the syllabus. 3 reasons why filmmakers should hire a producer's rep by Glenn Reynolds. All right, so producer rep is like a sales agent. They mostly do the same job functions. The difference is that a producer rep typically means that they're going to be domestic sales agents. They're going to work in the country that you're in. Whereas a sales agent, they're going to be international most of the time. So if you're talking about getting a sales agent, you're talking about trying to distribute internationally. And the sales agents will have more connections with people in other countries. They might be a distribution company from another country that's going to take it from you and try to sell it territorially to different locations. Whereas a producer's rep is going to be where you are, and they're going to try to distribute it where you are, or at least get a distributor from your area anyway. Because a producer's rep isn't a distributor. They work to find distributors to purchase your film or your film. Some distributors are only going to work through sales agents or reps, especially depending on how much, how big they are. We talked about this several times before, but Netflix, they don't work through people sending them their films anymore. If you have a finished product or not, it doesn't matter. They want to work through a sales agent or a producer's rep or a distributor. They have certain companies that they've worked with before, and they have certain relationships with those people. So they even have preferred sales agencies or sales agents and producer reps that they work with. So if you really wanted to get on something like Netflix, because they're so big and because they have so many submissions, and that's what everybody goes for, you can only do it by getting to their preferred agents or preferred reps to get them to then get you in contact with Netflix. You can't just go straight to Netflix. And then not even just Netflix, some other distributors, like even smaller ones, some of them just only want to work through sales agents and reps. But some distributors have more of an open door policy where they're fine looking through more content. But again, many of them are wanting to work through reps and agents. And a few reasons why is because agents or reps, they're going to know the language, they're going to know the terms, they're going to know realistic numbers to try to go for sales or for deals. They're going to know like the standard and all of that. So they're not going to shoot too high to try to get too big of a percentage for themselves. They're also going to not try to lowball it. They're going to negotiate it and try to get the best deal, but they're not going to, go too high up or too far down, because they're going to know that those numbers aren't realistic. And they're also going to know when a deal is good. So if a distributor is making a good deal, the producer's rep and the sales agents are going to know it better than a independent filmmaker that might not know what's good, what's not. And it will just be a longer process to try to figure out if they want to distribute their film with them or not. Agents also know the distributors and their work. So they know what those distributors are going to take, and they'll bring them stuff that better matches what they distribute. An independent filmmaker can do this. We've talked about this before. You should always do your research to try to figure out who best fits your project, who best fits your film, because then you'll have better chance of getting in with them. But the agents and the producers reps are really going to know, all of the different distributors that maybe some you never even heard of, maybe some that work exclusively with independent projects. And so they're going to know better what distributor might take your content and who to go to. Also, agents work as a buffer for distributors. Instead of the distributor viewing 10,000 submissions and trying to figure out what they want to distribute, the agents will be bringing them the best out of the selection. So the agent might see 10,000 submissions and choose their favorites out of that, or maybe they take all 10,000 of them and they try to give them the best ones that are going to fit with the distributor. I mean, obviously 10,000 is way too many, so that wouldn't happen, but maybe they take 10 films and they know that only one film is going to match to the distributor. Well, now the distributor doesn't have to look at 10 films. They only have to look at one to decide if they want it or not. So they often like working through agents and reps because of that as well. That's less work for them to do, less labor, less crap for them to sift through to find what they like. An agent's also going to know how those distributors operate after the contracts are signed. So do those distributors communicate often? How often do they share royalty reports? And do they pay on time? How closely do they stick to the contracts, or do they try to find any loopholes or ways to ignore some of the supposed obligations? Do they find ways around things? These are all things that an agent's going to know, or they'll be more savvy on, because they've either worked with those people before, or they've heard things through their contacts and connections. So they kind of know to avoid certain distributors, certain people, certain companies, because they've heard that they're either hard to work with or they never communicate. They might give a good deal in the contract, but then they don't post the royalty reports as often as they should, and you get paid randomly and it's not in a timely manner. There's all these different things that can happen even after the contracts are signed, where the producer reps and the agents, they want the best deal. Excuse me. They want the best deal for your project because they are going to make a commission on it most of the time. Most of them work through commission. So once they sell it, they get a percentage of those sales. And once there's incoming revenue, they're going to get that percentage of the revenue. And so they want to get the best deal and they want to get paid as often as possible. So they're going to try to work with the best people. And so that's another thing that an agent will know, that an independent filmmaker will either have to take a much longer time to figure out, or they're just never going to really know because there's not that information out yet about that distributor or company. This stuff comes from, excuse me, this stuff comes from distribution.la. I think it's, yeah, all right. So it's C under producer rep in the syllabus. Some producer reps charge an upfront fee, but they may also either do a combination of charging a lesser upfront fee and taking a larger commission, just taking commission, or just doing an upfront fee. Most of them will do some kind of percentage on the revenue no matter what, but they might do a higher percentage on the revenue and a smaller fee up front, no fee up front, but a larger percentage of the revenue, or a smaller percentage of the revenue, but a larger fee up front. It just depends on what the deal is. Distribution LA, they believe that if you get into one of the big festivals like Sundance, Toronto, Cannes, or Tribeca, then you should get a team together with a producer rep, an agent, and a PR or public relations person or team. That way you're getting, you know what to do. And because if you get into one of those big ones, it's a much higher likelihood that you're going to get some interest from somebody for that thing. And hopefully you get 2 or 3 different companies interested in distributing it, because then you're going to start a bidding war on your material. But of course, those festivals are hard to get into. So if you're just going for something like video on demand or DVD or Blu-ray, then they think that you should contact distributors yourself. They also say most of the time you'll want to split up your domestic sales and your international. So you don't want to give all the rights to one person or one company. You want to split those up, because a domestic sales is going to be better to a producer rep because they're more used to doing things domestically. They have more connections and contacts in the country that they're working in. Whereas the international sales, a sales agent is going to be better at it. So the only time you really don't want to split up your the rights to domestic and international sales is if one of the large studios or networks comes knocking, and then you want to do worldwide rights deals. So then you give them the worldwide rights to distribute it for a certain amount of time, because it's, such a big company that's coming to you that you're going to get a good deal out of it, most likely, if you have the right representation and you're making sure that you're getting a good deal. But in most cases, you're not going to have the biggest studios and networks coming to you to try to buy your project. Those are usually sent to them through their already pre-established connections. And so that's not really something you have to really worry about. And so in that case, you always want to try to split up your domestic and international sales, because even if a sales agent or a producer's rep says that they can do it everywhere, if a producer's rep says, yeah, I can do it domestically and I'll also do it internationally, or if you get a sales agent and they go, yeah, and I can also do it in your country if you'd like, and you give them all the rights. Sales agents aren't as good domestically. They don't have as many connections and contacts. They are solely for international stuff most of the time. So they're not going to know as much. And even if they get it sold somewhere domestically, they're not going to get as good of deals because they don't have those relationships and that knowledge of the network here in the industry, and all the people that are in it and the companies and how exactly it's set up compared to where they're at. And the producers rep, same thing. They might not even, they won't even do international sales most of the time. They're gonna, if they say that they're going to do it, what they'll do is they will basically get in contact with a sales agent. And so then basically you're just spending a little bit of extra money for the producer's rep to do what you could have done and finding a sales agent. Sometimes it's good because the producer's rep might know the sales agents to go to. So they might have a better chance of those relationships and getting people on board to buy it. But in other cases, the producer's rep's pretty much going to be doing exactly what you would have done and researching online to find sales agents that might take it internationally. So you really want to do your research on the people and figure out, or the company, and figure out what course you want to take with that. If you're trying for international distribution at all, though, a sales agent is almost always going to be necessary. There's hardly ever a time that you're going to be able to self-distribute internationally. Like there's too much stuff going on, there's too much work, and you'd have to set up a huge amount of things to be able to have all the rights and the legal stuff down and making sure that it's all technically correct and all these other things. So if you're trying to get it internationally at all, you're just almost always going to need a sales agent of some kind. But that's but yeah, so you do want to split it up because you're going to be able to maximize your returns if you give it to a producer rep domestically, but then you also give it to a sales agent internationally. They'll both work their connections, their circles as best they can and get you the best deals with what they can, and you will get maximum profit back by doing that instead of just giving all the rights to one or the other. Unless, again, it's a huge company, HBO Max comes to you, or Netflix, or some big huge company comes to you and wants it, then you would want to give them the worldwide rights because they're probably not going to make a deal with you otherwise anyway. If you want to hire a producer rep, you want to have something in a contract that says that they can't, this is coming still from Distribution LA, all this stuff. If you want to hire a producer rep, have something in a contract that says they can't shotgun the movie everywhere all at once to all the distributors, but that they have to do it in batches. That way, if the first batch of all the distributors say no, you and your producer rep can go back to your artwork, your trailer, your press kit, all these different things that you're trying to get distributors interested in on to click on that the image and then watch the trailer and then get interested in that. So then maybe they're going to watch the film now, because you're not just gonna be able to send a film and distributors watch it. You have to send these other things to gain their interest. And so the producer rep will be able to work with you to figure out what might have gone wrong if everybody's saying no. It could be the film, but in a lot of instances, the distributors are going to say no just because they didn't like the artwork, or they liked the artwork, but they didn't like the trailer, or they just think it couldn't sell based on the press kit, like who's in it, IMDb, and all that other stuff. So if you gave them the rights, you didn't have it in their contract, and they might be one of those producer reps that just show it to everyone all at once, it is bad, because if everyone receives it all at once and maybe the artwork isn't cutting it, so they all pass before even checking the trailer or the movie, then you're kind of just stuck because it's already been shown to everyone and they all passed already. Whereas if you do it in batches and you have that in their contract that you can only give it to, you can only show it to 15 distributors at once or 20 distributors at once. Maybe there's 100 distributors they're trying to go to. Well, now they can only show it to 20, get no's, show it to 20 more, get no's, things like that, instead of showing it to all 100 at once. So it's always something you want to try to do, but you also want to be a little. I would say you want to try to make sure that it's a good deal for them as well. If it don't do too low of a number to where it's going to take them forever to try to pitch your film to anybody, because then they're just going to say no to your deal, or they're just going to like turn you away. But if you can, try to get it in the contract. They can't just blast it to everyone, because you want to try your best to market it to these distributors so that somebody buys it. And then this next stuff comes from D, the guerrilla rep. If a producer rep comes on the production in the beginning, they're going to be doing the job of an executive producer. We're talking executive producer of a film. So they're going to be helping to finance the film in the best way possible. However, if you've never met them, you have no track record, this is like your first project, you're a new producer, and you want them to start raising money like an executive producer tries to do, that most likely is not going to happen. It's usually only going to happen for them to come in early and do all of that. It's usually because they either already know you, you're pre-established, you've done plenty of films and they've made some money back, or they've broken even, or you have a big name attached or just a big budget. So they just believe in the project. Very rarely you might find out that, you maybe have a great script that they just really connect with, and so they just give you the benefit of the doubt and go for the chance to do it and come on early to help you out. But oftentimes that's not going to be the case. But some will come on early and work more as a guide until completion. So if you are more new or they don't know you, but you've had previous films, they might not come on to try to raise money, but they might come on to just kind of help you through it, guide you through like different things that can help with marketing and distributing later on, so that you're working on that stuff as you go. And then just like distributors that won't just work with independent filmmakers, they want sales agents, producer reps. Well, they want sales agents or producer reps. A producer rep isn't going to work with all first-time directors and producers. If they choose to, it's mostly only on a completion or near the end of production. But a lot of them don't like working with first-time people because it's a lot more work on their part to make sure you understand what's happening, that you're getting a good deal, that you can trust them. It's a lot more to work through because you don't understand all of that side of the business yet. You haven't gone through it. And so a lot of them will just be less likely to work with a first-time director or producer. So if you can, you want to try to get a producer on your film that has done it at least once before. So at least you have a little bit of like business sense, or even if you do have business sense, you can show that to other people that you've done it before, so they if you haven't personally done it yourself. If a rep or an agent is guaranteeing that they can sell your film, you want to be very cautious of them, because you shouldn't really have anybody guaranteeing anything. Nobody knows what's going to sell or what's not. Even the biggest of films fail and flop all the time. So the biggest of budgets, 200 million into this budget, and it has great actors and everything. It flopped. Why? Who knows? People didn't want to watch it. They didn't like the story. They didn't like those actors. That actor did something recently. They just came out at the wrong time. Everybody had no money because it was right after Christmas. There's all sorts of reasons why that can happen. So you should never have somebody guaranteeing you anything. And if you do, just be very cautious to get into a deal with that person. And then these next ones come from F, Stage 32, medium.com. Reps and agents have connections. They know what distributors are looking for. So especially if you live in an area that isn't one of the main film hubs, you're going to get access to distributors you might not otherwise, because they're going to have those connections that you aren't going to have. So even if you're trying to self-distribute, if you live in Ohio, it's going to be hard for you to get in connection with people from LA and New York and Atlanta, Toronto, and all these other filming hubs. So if you get in a connection and you get a producer rep that's in that area or in that country, or in the country with you, they'll be able to connect with those distributors a lot easier than what you will be able to do. A good rep or agent is going to push your film. They're going to make sure that the contacts understand the importance of it. It will also be transparent to you about their goals for the film and allow you to make final decisions in festival submissions and on the sales deals. So they're not going to try to make decisions without you. They're going to keep you informed and be transparent. And they're also going to share the goals of what they're planning to do with your film once it's complete. And then, of course, they're going to actually push your film to the distributors. They're going to make it stand out. They're going to try their hardest to make your film stand apart from others and explain why it's different or why it's good compared to more. You typically don't want to have a producer rep that has dozens to hundreds of films that they have not sold yet, as this could indicate more of a throw everything and see what sticks mentality. So instead of them just saying, here's 200 films, which one do you like? Because then they're not really giving any, they're not really showcasing your film as much as you would want them to be. They're just saying, here's 200 different things, check them out and see what you like. That's not going to have as much of a interest from distributors as them trying to really showcase yours to them and saying, this one's great, check it out. Then they're more likely to check yours out and give a deal. And if they have all those dozens or hundreds of films that they haven't sold yet, then they might just be grabbing on tons of films that they are just going to have a deal with somebody for a year or 2 years or however long and never really sell it. And then that film is just going to be stuck in limbo. If you are promoting your film through social media throughout the production, you may also start to receive offers from different agents offering these big deals and guarantees. And these are most of the time the companies that just scour social media for products and usually should be avoided. They're not necessarily scams, but they're most likely not going to give you the best deals. And they're just looking for new and inexperienced people to try to get the best deal they can while leaving you scraps. So if you're just getting offers from people, it's a little bit opposite of how it really happens. It does suck, but most of the time you're going to have to go out, do the research, and find the reps and agents yourself and reach out to them yourself and wait for them to reply to you. A lot of the reps and agents aren't going to come to you. This isn't always the case, and especially if you've already done festivals and things like that, then you might get contacts and connections from those people. But if you're not even done with your film and you're getting contacts, most likely avoid those agencies or people. The only time, me personally, that I would say to look further into it is if they're saying that they are new distributor or a new sales rep or agency or something like that, then they might just be looking for projects to represent to grow their business. And they have a better chance of them being legit than something else. But if they're not saying anything like that, I would just personally, I would say avoid them as well as this website. When reaching out to people and companies, you should also expect only for a small percentage, something like 2% to reply. And that's even when you get like go to a producer rep or a sales agent. They're going to send it out to multiple agencies, multiple distributors and things like that. And not everybody is going to reply. Not everybody's going to be interested. So they're just going to pass immediately. And so they might hear only back from like 2 or 3% or 10% maybe if they're really lucky. But you as well, when you're trying to find a producer rep for your project or a sales agent, expect to only receive replies from a few of them. And then as you go further into it, expect them to start dropping out, because the more they see, even if they're interested to see after they see the artwork, they want to see the trailer. Well, after they see the trailer, a few of them are going to decide that's not for them. They're going to drop out. So just be aware and ready for that, because it is hard to break through and get through to somebody, but the ones you do get through are going to be the ones that spent the time and took the time to reply and keep in contact with you to check out your project. Especially if you're trying to get a producer rep or a sales agent during production or in pre-production, you're trying to kind of get them in on it, saying, hey, I know you represent films like this. I'm planning to make it. Here's the idea, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, yeah, that sounds good. Let me know when you're done with it. You might not contact them for months later, but at least then you're starting that connection, that relationship, and you've put yourself out there. And then when you're done with the film, you might contact all the same people, even the ones that said, yeah, tell me when you're done. And you might not hear back from any of them, or you might only hear back from 1 or 2 of them, just because that's how it is. So always expect to hear back from much less people than what you are trying to contact. What was this website again? Stage 32 Medium. They also recommend to not sign any contract with a producer rep or a sales agent. I think it's just producer rep on this point, actually. That is over 18 months. So you usually want to get the standard agreement, which is 12 months for a representation term. So they'll represent your film for 12 months, but if nothing comes of it, you get the film's rights back and you can go shop it around to other people. You can try to self-distribute, whatever else. But if they're trying to get it for 18 months, 32 months, however long, you don't want to be stuck with that, because if they can't sell it, if they're like one of those people that are taking on all these films and they just have hundreds that they haven't sold, and then you find out that in the agreement that they get to keep your film for 3 years or 4 years, there's nothing you can do with it. And it's just going to be with them for the next 4 years until you finally get it back. So always check that. Make sure that the agreement, you usually want it to be around 12 months, no longer than 18 months is what they say. You also want to ask a lot of questions when you do, ask a lot of what if questions when you do find somebody that you like, and make sure that, and if they're interested in your film, ask like, what if we get into Sundance? How is that going to affect our plans or our goals? Or what if, and if they tell you part of their goal is to try to go for Tubi, and you're like, okay, what if we get rejected by Tubi? What then? Just try to ask a lot of those what if questions to get a really good sense of what their plans are and what their backup plans are in case those fail. So you can make sure that they are having a plan that is executable. Sales agents will be more inclined to join.
And that's why, honey, I was just going to say, and that's why it's good to know at least some of your stuff, so you can have a conversation with the sales agent and know what to look for, what questions to ask, how to know if they're doing their, like, if they're prepared, and also understand what they're telling you. Because one of the things that sales agents said a lot was that one of the reasons they don't work with first-time filmmakers was because of that, because it's so, like, they don't understand anything. You have to explain everything to them, you know, and it just takes longer, it's harder, and it's more of a hassle.
Yeah,
So
because they don't know
knowing
any
your
of the
stuff makes a
terms. They
huge
don't know
difference.
any of what the financing terms mean. And so it's harder to get them to understand what the deal even is.
And those are stuff that they would consider basic, like an IPM. So it's just stuff that they're like, oh, sometimes you just can't be bothered working with first timers because it's just so much that we have to explain to them right off the bat. And they'll also like not understand things, and so they won't know, like, oh, are you giving me a good deal? Are you screwing me over? Blah blah blah. Some of them kind of treat you like that too. So yeah, it's always good to know your stuff for their sake and for yours, even if it's just being able to carry a conversation and explain to them basic stuff.
Yeah. All right, and then sales agents are going to be more inclined to join early on in a project, a production, if it's a larger budgeted project, of course. So if it's over $500,000 for the budget, they're more inclined to join early, because the bigger your budget, the more likely you are to get named actors and to get people that know what they're doing and to be able to actually make something with this thing. Otherwise, they're all going to most likely only join upon the completion or near the end of your production. So just keep that in mind. Like, a lot of them were saying the same thing. You want to try to contact them if you are actually going to make this film. You might want to start contacting people and getting interest, doing your research, even in pre-production, to see who might even be willing to look into representing this film, because what kind of films do they represent? Is mine matching them? That kind of thing. And, you know, are they good business people? What did people who've worked with them say? And all of that different stuff. And then maybe reaching out to them during production and seeing if anyone's interested in seeing the product once you are complete with it, and then contacting them again maybe 6 months to a year later once you're actually done. Or once you're in the edit, if you are done with the first draft and you're ready to show it to outside viewers or whatever, then maybe you want to contact some people and see if they want to look at it, some of these producer reps. Me personally, I would say if you do not have a producer rep on board already, don't show your rough cut to them. I would say wait until you're done with the edit, or at least have it to a point where it's nearly done, because seeing a project without music, without sound effects, and with a rough cut, so it's not like fine-tuned, so producer reps and sales agents and distributors might all be like, no, we know film, we know how it works, we know what's gonna come along, how it's gonna come along, you know, and we will look past all the flaws for now. But in reality, they might
That's
just
a
be
lot
like,
harder to
oh,
do when you're more focused on the business side of it and you're not able to stop and take every project and try to see what it could be. Like, you don't have time for that.
right. So I would say, personally, I would say wait. You know, if someone's showing extreme interest in it, then maybe show it to them. But otherwise, try your hardest to just be like, no, I'll show you when it's complete. Because otherwise, you might get people drawn away before you even actually finish your film, and they might otherwise have liked it and wanted to represent you, but you showed them too early of a cut and it wasn't ready yet because it didn't have all those aspects that make a film great, like music and sound effects and things that you really need, coloring too. So all that stuff. All right, and then this stuff comes from under sales agents. Letter B, how to find a film sales agent. So he recommends, there's a site called, I think it's Senando. I hate that. All right, Senando, it's like a site that does have an annual subscription. but it offers networking where you can find agents and filmmakers and begin trying to get some of those email connections going. It's where you can start talking to them. So if you don't know where to look or where to even try to find people, this site apparently has, a bunch of different filmmakers, a bunch of different professionals in the industry where you can network with some of them to really start seeing stuff. You can also look in places like LinkedIn, and there's other websites that have filmmakers, but he just recommended going to this one because even though it is, I think it's 129 euros a year. So I don't know how much it is in USD, but 150 or whatever. Even though that's, it's the price per year, it is worth it to get in touch with a bunch of people. If you are trying, I think this one is based in, where is it? Britain or England or something like that. So it is also an international thing. So if you're trying to get international sales agents, that's definitely one you want to go to. And when we're talking about sales agents, we're talking about internationally. So it doesn't really matter that it's from another country because that's what the sales agent is going to do. You're going to get international distribution from them. If you're looking for domestic, remember producer rep. If you're looking for international, sales agent. Then there's also PMDs, which are producers of marketing and distribution. And let me go back to this. So that's the purple side. That is something that I don't know too much about. He explains a tiny bit, but I'm going to look into it more and we'll talk about that at another day. But they tend to join the production early, especially when compared to producer reps who may not come to the production until the end of it or during post-production. Producer of market and distribution deals, like their title entails, with marketing and distribution. They come up with the plans to execute for like what the marketing plan is and what the strategies will be to market it to different film markets, to market it to different audiences, what the target audience is going to be. And then distribution, they'll work with what the distribution plan is and that kind of stuff. Then there's what's called aggregators, which again, I don't know anything about them yet. I do know that they mostly deal with the technical side of things, like getting your film ready for sale on platforms and video on demand. So they will be the ones getting the format correct and the audio correct and everything right so that the video on demand platforms will accept it. And I've heard mixed things about aggregators. I've heard from some people say, avoid them. You can do it all yourself. It's not that hard. And then other people say you need it. So we'll talk about that in more depth later on and hear what other people have to say from more sources. Also, distributors will act as an aggregator in most situations. So if you get a producer rep and they get a distributor, then they're going to act as an aggregator because they're going to try to get it onto those video on demand platforms and like the theatrical thing. Aggregators will not do theatrical distribution though. So if you do want to get theatrical distribution, you need to go with a distributor. Aggregators are more like, it sounds like they're a distributor, but only for the online video platforms, pretty much. Like, Netflix, Tubi, and all those other ones. There's a million now, Hulu, whatever else. So for now, here's how I kind of see it going with all of these different members. If you had a very large budget film, you might hire a producer of marketing and distribution, or a PMD, and a producer rep early on. The producer rep, if they're hired early on, would try to secure financing the best way possible, while both give you advice for setting the project up for marketing, like what actors to get and like what actors to cast or what actors to contact and things like that, as well as the strategies for marketing and distribution and all that type of stuff. Once the film is done, a producer rep and the PMD work to get interest from distributors and raise awareness for the film. Producer rep would be working on the distribution, trying to get distributors interested, and a producer of marketing and distribution, or a PMD, is going to be raising awareness for the film, trying to execute that marketing plan, or working with the marketing department or marketing person or whatever, if you have that on your set as well. Distributors get interested. If the distributors get interested and make an offer or start a bidding war, if there's multiple interested, then there'll be negotiations until one of the deals is agreed upon. Theatrical release and video on demand, domestic, unless a distributor bought the world rights, then they would handle international as well. Otherwise, they'll just do theatrical release and video on demand domestically. And then the producer's rep would contact a sales agent and negotiate or make a deal. Sales agents would handle the international distribution, and it would go on from there. However, if you're a smaller production, the way I see it is you may only get a producer rep or a sales agent, depending on what you're trying to do. And after making the film and it's done, you get them and they come onto your set. So they don't even come before it's being made. They come after you're done. And then they try to work out a deal with the distributors. Or you may get an aggregator to work as somebody to get your film technically ready for video on demand services. If you're going to skip past producers, reps, sales agents, and distributors altogether, you're going to go for the aggregators because they still will have more connections than you will. I mean, lastly, what you might do is try to self-distribute, but you will be limited in your options of who's going to contact you and things like that. It can be done. It's just going to be a lot harder. And depending on where you're trying to go, it actually can't be done if you're trying to get on certain distributing platforms that are not going to connect with individuals, but they're going to connect through pre-established relationships with other companies that they have, like sales agents and reps. Then you have to go through them. And like I said, we'll look more into aggregators and producers of marketing and distribution later, and figure out if what I just said is actually how it goes, or if it's a little bit different from that. But that's how I see it going from all the things I understand of these different parties and how it works. Producers rep's going to be your best friend in trying to get the best deal possible and figure out what to do. If they come on early, they're going to try to get you financing, and they're going to try to help you through the process to get it ready. PMD is going to help you with any plans to market it and distribute it, so that you are working on that from the beginning and you aren't just waiting until the end to try to get a producer's rep and then get the film distributed. You have a plan in place and you're working on it. And a distributor is going to work as an aggregator, trying to get it on the video on demand platforms, getting it ready with the artwork, this trailer, and everything else that's needed, as well as maybe doing a theatrical release. And then a sales agent will either be contacted through your producer's rep or your distributor or yourself to get it released internationally. That's how I see that all working. Now, this last little bit of stuff comes from Jay Horton, and he is letter E in the syllabus. Independent film sales agent spills the beans about distribution. A producer's rep or sales agent will know or work with you to figure out if you should go theatrical, do AVOD, which is advertising-based video on demand. So those free ones that show advertisements, Hulu, basic version, that kind of thing. SVOD, or subscription video on demand, which is Netflix, HBO Max, or anything that requires a subscription from the viewer. TVOD, transactional video on demand. Again, that's renting it or buying it. Amazon does this, and there's other ones like Vudu and whatever else. Or if you should go with all the options. So they'll help you figure out what to market it to, and what might be the best route to get the most money or the most exposure, depending on what you want. They'll also know, or the distributors will know, what the pay from the platform is, whether they pay per hour of view time. So like every time somebody views something, they view it for an hour or more, and you get paid for that amount of time they view it. Or a better way of doing it for independent people and for most companies is what's called CPM, which is cost per mile. It's just a term that means that you get paid per 1,000 impressions. So when 1,000 people click on your thing, even if they only watch it for 5 seconds, that's still an impression that was made upon them. And so you get paid a certain number of a certain amount for every 1,000 impressions that you get. So 1,000 people click on your thing, you get $1 or something, you get 50 cents, whatever it is. And then if that happens over and over and over again, you're making money. And so they're going to know what those platforms pay is, how much they pay, and how their pay structure works, and be able to figure out the best one to get on, because they all work. Some work similarly and some work differently. So you just have to know, they will know how their pay structure is. One tip he gives is to name your film something different. So don't make it weird spellings, like with numbers. Like if you did the word freak for your movie, you don't want to do the E backwards, but it's actually a 3, because it's just going to be impossible to find. Nobody's going to type in freak, and when they're trying to look up your movie, they're not going to do FR3AK. They're just going to type freak, and then your film's probably not going to pop up. So try to avoid those weird spellings and things like that. Try to keep it simple, but also keep it different. If it has the same name as an older movie from like 30 years ago, even, the platforms, like the video on demand platforms, often will use a automated system that imports some of the metadata, like the description, the summary, what actors are in that project and things like that, from IMDb or wherever else they might get that information. And if you have the same name as an older movie, that AI may accidentally pull up the summary from the wrong movie. He even gave the example, he was saying that he had a family film that he made, and it had the same movie as, it wasn't softcore porn, but it was very close to that. And so whenever he put it on the platform, whatever platform it was, it brought up the summary from the erotic movie on his family film. So it sounded like something completely different than what his film was, and he wasn't going to get the right audience. And there was nothing he could do, because that platform just uses an AI to automatically generate that metadata, that summary. So that was something he said he wished he looked into and made sure that he didn't go with that name, because that name was taken by an older movie, and it just made there was confusion. Not just that, but also, your film's independent, and it's going to be hard to look up in general. And then if there's another film that's named that same thing, you might get less traffic to your thing. Even if they're trying to specifically look up your project, they might run into the older project or the other one that's a little bit more popular or well-known. So that's also something you want to think about. You want to check your title, because you can't copyright a title, which is why you see films that have the same title. Apparently, copywriting a title is not allowed. So you can have the same title as an older film. You're not going to get in trouble for it. It's just going to cause confusion, make it harder to find your film, and make it possible that those AI systems grab the wrong information and input it in place of yours. And the last thing from him that I'm going to say is, a sales agent won't help promote your film. Their job is to get the best possible deal from a distributor. So they might try to promote it to the distributors, but they're not going to be marketing your film and trying to promote it all across social media and wherever else to raise awareness of it. Their main goal is just to getting the best deal possible from a distributor or platform. So that is why there's the PMD and these other job functions that sound similar, but they're more focused on the marketing aspect of everything. A distributor might do some marketing, depends on the deal you get with them. But the producer rep and the sales agent, they're only going to be trying to get the distributor. And so if you do need marketing after the fact, you're going to have to try to get it through a deal with the distributor, and the distributor will charge you based on the revenue for doing the marketing. So all that stuff is stuff you have to keep in mind. And if you do get a producer rep to try to represent you, you have to let them know that you want the distributor's deal to have marketing in it. That be part of the deal so that they are marketing it. And you should always market your own film anyway, but some people are more savvy on it than others. So we've talked a little bit about that in previous meetings, and we'll talk more about it as we go. And next semester is going to be all about that. So with marketing. But does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to add to producer reps, sales agents, distributors, aggregators, or PMDs?
No questions right now.
Cool. Yeah, so this is why it is hard for movies to make money. This is why it's hard for independent productions to get their money back. It's because it has to go through so many different layers, so many different people to get to the final end viewer. And then that viewer, you have to somehow get people to go and view your project. And with all these platforms and all these services, and everybody's making projects left and right, and cameras are cheaper now, so anybody can pick up a camera and go outside and make a video, but not everybody's going to be able to make a good film.
Another frustrating thing is just the fact that how many distributors have said that oh, we don't really care if the story is good or not. We just care who's in it, if the artwork is good, if the trailer is good. And it's a sad reality. And I know it's true, because at the end of the day, they're gonna matter more how marketable it is, how much revenue they can make, that kind of thing, more often than not. It is a sad reality, though. It just kind of sucks. And it does really explain why we have so much crap, though.
Yeah, and he was saying and they were saying that when you do have that CPM, that cost per mile, which just means 1,000 people are clicking on your thing, the main thing there is going to be the trailer and the artwork. They click on it and they watch 5 seconds of it and they go, oh, this thing's a piece of crap. Well, they already got their impression now, so they look at different things like that because they're looking only at the business side. And
which I'm not saying those things aren't important. They are extremely important, and a lot of filmmakers overlook them because they're so focused on their project, which might be amazing. But yeah, those things are necessary too. But it just kind of sucks because it seems like both sides are narrow-minded in one aspect, which makes sense because they're focused on the part that is their job. But it does kind of make it hard because we end up with a lot of crap.
Yeah, and it's also just oversaturation. There's so many projects out there that they don't have the time. They might have in the past had the time to really look through things because maybe they were getting 15 films a week, and so they had a little bit more time to look through them. But now they could be getting hundreds of submissions a week. And so it just depends on where it's coming from and who. And that's why you're starting to see the transition over to no, we only work through producer reps, or no, we only work through sales agents, because they just don't want to have to filter through everything. They want to make sure that what they're getting is going to be at least maybe something that
what I also understand is they're also seeing okay, who put effort in to try to make it, because unfortunately that is a reality too, that filmmakers focus so much on this is such a cool script, this is such a cool story, but they don't really try to make it look the best it can or try to market it the best they can. And it ends up being like, well, you might have the best product, but if you don't know how to sell it, to me, if you don't know how to present your product, how to present your pitch, how to present, how to give your pitch basically, then yeah, like I'm not going to be able to see it because I'm not in your head. I am not going to see what you see. And so you need to be able to present that. And I understand that from a business perspective, you're looking at it and you want to see, okay, what looks good? What looks like I'm not going to need to jump a million hoops, explain a million things, work even harder when there's so much saturation out there. What comes to me that I can work with. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I mean, there's saturation, and then there's, I think a lot of it has to do with this fast-paced social media. And,
definitely.
Because now every day, like I was just watching a movie on my television on Amazon Prime, and I was having the hardest time getting through it because I continuously kept picking up my phone and checking messages and stuff like that. So it's like that content, that realm is like slowly starting to deteriorate.
Well, sometimes it's just because the movie's boring. Like it's not capturing your time. But yeah, definitely. Like we were watching an old movie. I think it was Spider-Man. Yeah, we were watching Spider-Man the other day, the first Sam Raimi one. And the credits were long, but they were engaging. Like they were cool to look at, but they were so long to the point where we skipped through them. And we were like, man, I bet that in the theater, people must have been so looking at it and looking forward to it and like anticipating and excited and going through the credits. That was considered normal. And now if we find a movie that has beginning credits, we just, oh my gosh, when is it going to end? Skipping through it. So that was something that I noticed. I was like, that's interesting.
I'm trying to explain that to like this. I did this one film for these clients, and I had put the title of the movie at the end, and then like they wanted, because it was such a short film, they wanted to like, oh, can we have like these opening credits at the beginning? And I was like, no, man, you gotta either at the beginning or the end. But I said, like, the film is so short, you're just gonna be losing your audience putting all these credits at the beginning, because nowadays, like everybody, nobody's paying attention and stuff like that. So I think it'd be better if you just start the film and then have the credits and then do the end, because it's such a short film.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's sad. Like you said, the business aspect of it, the way it's being seen, and I think I brought this up early, not early, but like months ago, that some of these actors, that's the way they perceive. Not all, but some. You could tell the actors that are passionate about it. They love it, versus the ones that the money, the fame, and stuff like that.
And that's another thing that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
But yeah, so you could tell that they take, some of the actors take it like so you see like an actor and he's like, oh, I don't want to do this role anymore. I don't want to do this part anymore. You're like, why? Why don't you want to play this part? You have so many fans and people love it, and but to them, they see it as a job. And to us, we see it as the greatest thing ever. To them, it's like just another day of the week. Business. To them, it's just a page.
One thing that I do think is interesting, and I was debating with Coda.
That's why also, like, you'll see that actors start getting like, okay, I'm ready to move on from the show if it's gone on for like 10 seasons or something.
And then they leave and ruin the show completely. Topher Grace. Well, it was already not that great towards the end, but still, like, that was such a freaking. But yeah, so you ruin the entire thing. But you've been doing it for like 7 seasons, and you're like, I'm ready to move on. I want to be something else. I want to push myself further. Like, I don't want to stay stuck in the same thing just because it's a steady paycheck. So I can understand that. But on the creative aspect, there's also, like, I was talking to Coda, they're also talking about, names matter a lot. And yes, I know that they do. And I know that when we see an actor that we like in a film, we're like, oh, okay, this must be interesting. This person's in it. But I did hear someone, I don't remember who it was, but it was a debate about like Hollywood stars and how now we don't really see them the same way that back in the day people used to see them, like idolize them and think they were amazing and all this stuff. They're just normal people that do a job and we like their work. And so a lot of people were debating if there is a true Hollywood, like there's not many true Hollywood stars anymore that you will see everything that they're in. And if there are, they're not that many, but also is that as big of a factor now as it was back then? Because that's a main thing that studios look for is name. And I don't know how much, like, of course, there's always going to be those actors that are good and okay, that actor's good. He's probably going to be good in this. But if there's anything that those big, like holiday movies that have a million big name celebrities have taught us, it's that you can put the best actors. If they have a bad script, if the movie's bad, they're going to be bad. So I don't know how much power, staying power that still has. And I feel like the market, I don't know, that's a problem that's never going to be solved. I feel like that's every business, they have people that work in their area and they focus on their area and that's it. I just feel like kind of frustrating when we see them making like a million movies of the same thing and not wanting to take any risks. Yes, it's a business standpoint, I understand, but it just kind of feels like they think that we're robots and they're an algorithm. They're robots and they're an algorithm feeding it to us because they're like, oh, you liked this, so here's more of this and more of that. And it just doesn't feel like there's any true thought put into it anymore. It's just like, what's going to make us money? This worked. Let's throw a bunch of that in their faces.
You're absolutely right, and I hear where that's coming from. But at the same time, that's our fault because we continue to support it.
Yeah.
Like this Batman. Yeah. How many Batmans do we need? Like,
Yeah.
if they even try different stories of Batman, we have a bunch of different Batman stories, but they always do the same ones. That's what sucks.
Exactly. I mean, and like you said, they're just recycling stuff. And I got into this big debate with, because now, I hate everybody's comparing, Christian Bale, and they're saying they're doing to Christian Bale like everybody's doing Tupac, pretty much. If you pay attention to the music industry, Tupac and Biggie, they're seen, and you've heard people say Tupac was the greatest rapper
and
ever.
Most of them have never heard more than an album of theirs or like half their stuff, and they're like, oh, but they are.
I'm not discrediting Tupac or that statement, but a lot of the new guys, a lot of the new rappers are jealous and saying, well, how do we compete? And it's the same thing with the Batman movie. Everybody's trying to, well, Christian Bale was, his Batman was overrated. And I was like, it wasn't because it kind of set a bar. Everything after that movie was kind of like took something from it.
And everything before it was cheeseballs.
Exactly. Everything before it was like its own thing. And then, Nolan came and did his own thing and set his bar. And then everything after that kind of took from that. So it's kind of hard to say, I think the best thing they could do was do Batman Beyond. That way it would have been a different Batman. And
it just really irritates me because if we didn't have the Christian Bale Batman movies, we wouldn't have a lot of the superhero movies we have now. We wouldn't have a lot of the things we have now as far as cinema. So whether you like it or not, you can't discredit its place in movies, especially superhero films. So yeah, that's just kind of a frustrating argument.
It's not they're getting it.
And it's different too. Like, I don't feel like every actor will bring a different performance. Every actor will bring a different take, as they should. I don't want to have actors making copycats of the original, of the person who did it first, just with their face. Like, that would be boring. It's more interesting when we have actors do their take on characters.
The 3 different Spider-Man movies we've had with 3 different big league actors. It's kind of like what's happening. How many Spider-Man movies do we get? How many? And then now they're like, oh well, why don't we do a Spider-Verse and bring them all together? Are you kidding?
When they came out with Let There Be Carnage, I was so excited. I read the comics. I love Carnage. Not, it's not a good person, but it was a fun storyline. And so excited. The problem is they're not like, oh, let's make good Spider-Man stories. We have so much material to work with. They're like, oh, let's just recycle the same idea over and over and over again because that made money. That's what's frustrating.
Started it. They were like, we can't do anything with Toby anymore. You can't do, so why don't we just reboot it with, another guy? And then that didn't work out so well. So let's just reboot it again to match it with the Marvel universe. But now we gotta bring them back to make even more money. Like you said, they're just
and then it's like Robert Downey Jr.
Well, it's also just like the whole
so let's put someone
everything
else.
is superhero now, like everything. Because it's doing well. Now we got like all these TV shows that are doing, oh, let's do a comedic take on it. We'll do an animated take on it. And we'll do this thing. And we got The Boys. We got that.
To the point where when people
there's some that are good, but like they're so oversaturated with superheroes now that it gets to the point where it's just kind of like, man, I don't want to see another superhero. I'm sick of these guys.
If people used to ask me, or if surveys asked me, do you like superhero movies? 5 years ago, I would have been like, yes, I love them. Now I'm like, depends on the movie. They're kind of, it's just, I'm just.
But looking at it from a business standpoint on film, if you do make a superhero movie, you have a better chance of getting a distributor and things like that because that's what's selling and that's what they're looking for to buy. Like sometimes that's not the only thing, but obviously, if you have the money for it and you can make a good one, making a superhero film right now will get you a better chance of getting a distribution deal because
in their defense,
it's selling.
For another pro, in their defense as well, they're also trying to take advantage. Okay, this is the market that people are interested in. All of our scripts that we had, all of our ideas that we had for this, let's throw it in there before it's too late, before it doesn't make money anymore, before people don't want it anymore because this is our chance. Same thing with the rom-coms. Like certain rom-coms are coming back in or in the rom-com season, people were like, let's take all the scripts, all the stories that we have and throw it out there because we don't know how long this is going to stick. We don't know how long people are going to actually be interested in this and how long we're still going to be making profit from it. So to that point, I can also understand with that argument.
But yeah, and that's a good point in why you see batches of different things. Like I was saying, I think I said this last week about Twilight, and those movies got big. So then all of a sudden there was just vampires everywhere, vampires, werewolves, that type of stuff.
And most of them were based on books that already existed, stories that already existed. They were just bringing them to.
But the reason why we were seeing them over and over again is because everything was in development. It takes 2-3 years to make a film from the beginning to the end. So these things that were already halfway through production, even though we started seeing that vampires aren't in anymore, it was already to the point where some of these films were halfway through or all the way through production where it's like, well, we might as well release this next one. And then you start seeing a shift to the next thing. But that's why it takes like years to go from one material type to the next, is because
and the movie industry
production start, the other people look at the market. Like if we were to make a film, we were going to look at the market right now. We're going to see what is selling, and we're going to make a film based on those things if we're trying to make our money back or more. And by that point, it's going to be 3 years later by the time we finally get it all said and done. Most likely it'll be 3 years.
And if we're being completely honest with ourselves as consumers and film lovers, we have to admit that the film industry, the people that watch it, are a little hypocritical in the sense that we say that we want different things. We say that we want new projects, but we'll only go to the theater for the big blockbuster explosion movies. We'll only be interested in movies that have genres that are big right now, or not all of us, but a lot of us. And because that's what's in, and that's the easiest thing available. We won't go out of our way to look for the indie stuff a lot of the time. We won't go out of our way to look for different genres. not all of us, obviously, but I mean that most of the market, most of consumers, they just consume what's there. It's like, oh, I'm not going to go out and get food. I'm going to try to see, it's here. Okay, sure. I'll eat this. It's kind of like that. And that's also something that we kind of have to admit, that unfortunately, for better or for worse, as consumers will want to see something that, if they liked one movie about vampires, they're like, oh, there's another one. Like, I remember, this isn't just a teenager thing. When you find something, a genre you like or something you like, you go looking for more of it because you want to consume as much of it as you can. So
let me watch all
of them. I'm just saying that a lot of consumers are like that. Not all of them. It's not a rule, but I feel like it happens a lot.
Resident Evil, 28 Days Later, the Walk of the Dead, the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead, the Dead.
A lot of dead, yeah. A lot of dead.
I just refused to watch it for the longest time because I was like, it's just a glorified zombie, and it is. It's nothing special. So like, yeah, but its angle is like the character development. That's it. That's all The Walking Dead is. Like, it's not even about zombies.
There hasn't been character development like real in The Walking Dead since season 5.
Yeah, they killed off all the main characters, but I don't even think we discovered like why there are zombies. Like, is there a virus? I think it was like something in the water, but that was it. There was like no conclusion. Like, they're just in it to win it. There's no ending to it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. I'll stop the video in a minute anyway. We can talk afterward. But yeah, I mean, just to wrap it up, that's the reason why we see, and it starts getting oversaturated with a certain type of movie or a certain type of TV show or both, usually, because that's what's in. That's what the distributors are looking for. That's what the reps and the agents are saying. That the people going to them, they're saying, hey, this is what's in. This is what you should make. And so then that's what the people make, and that's what sells, because going back to that whole thing of the artwork and the trailer is often more important to the distributor than the story of the film, is because, it has those actors in it, or it has that what's in right now. It has a werewolf on the cover. It looks cool. It looks like this other thing that sold well. So people are more likely to click it and start watching it. So even if it's not a great film, it still has a higher chance of somebody getting interested and looking at it because it's what's in right then at that moment. So we see it all happen in these giant rotating, I don't know what to call it, but these cycles these rotating cycles of like, this stuff's in, so we're going to see a bunch of it for a few years, and then now this stuff's in. And I'm sure it's going to come to a point with superheroes. It might be a few years from now, but at some point I feel like it'll come to a point where people are oversaturated with it. They feel like they don't want to watch it anymore. They're sick of superheroes. And so it's going to move on to the next thing. But until then, superheroes are what's in right now. And that's mostly due to Marvel and DC heading it, mainly Marvel right now because of their whole thing. But so as filmmakers, we also need to just keep that in mind, that stuff is important. If you don't want to make something that is in right now, you're going to have a much harder time selling it. So you have to get some actors in on it, or some people who know how to sell things to try to help you out, a producer's rep in, or a sales agent to guide you through it, at least, so that you can get as best of a chance as you can to make your money back and then some. Because if you're not going with what else is already out there and popular, it's going to be harder for you to get sold once you're done. Even if you are going with the stuff that's popular, like if you were to make a superhero film, you can still try to be creative with it and make it something unique and different. And you still got to think about the marketing of it, no matter what kind of project you're making, whether it has to do with what's in right now or what's not. And it's just because superheroes are in for like the Hollywood standard, that doesn't mean that independent films all over the place are doing superhero films or TV shows. It's just the the AAA productions basically are the ones doing that stuff because it costs so much to do. So that's also something to think about. There's different markets for different things. Not everyone likes superhero movies. That's just what's the main popular thing in Hollywood and the high-end TV shows right now. But that doesn't mean that for independent scene and for different marketplaces, that's all there is. There's plenty of other variety out there. So you do want to check it out and do your research beforehand and make sure that you are having a plan and a guide. If you're trying to do it all yourself, just do your research, try to figure out, is this going to sell? How much might it sell for? How successful was the closest thing I can find to what my movie is? The closest idea that represents it or the genre to what I'm trying to do, so that you can have a better idea of what to budget and everything like that. Because that stuff's, it's really important. The creative side is extremely important, and making a great piece of art is incredible and awesome to do, but you also have to think about it from the business side. You have to think about the business side, or you have to get people that know the business side or that think about the business side, so you can focus on the creative and they can focus on the business. That's why you have that director and producer relationship in film projects. Director can be the creative and the producer can be more of the business, because you have to have both. You have to figure it out. And if you're an independent filmmaker and you're trying to do it all yourself, then you just kind of have to wear all the hats and you have to know a little bit of everything, which is, one of the reasons why doing this study group, so we can kind of learn all of it together and talk about it. Anyway, so what we're studying Thursday is going to be visual design and what that is, and how it goes with production design. Theme, what a theme is, how to follow it. Where to find distributors, I can only find a few sources for this, so I'll see. There might not be too much information on that. What a pre-sale is, we've kind of talked about that before, but we'll go into more depth again if there's anything new and different. And then just how television production differs from film production. So that's where we'll talk more in depth about maybe like the scheduling and the contracts and whatever else and how they work differently, more than just the job roles like we did today. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.